I'm doing this to have the freedom to be able to have the people I want to have around me have there. And then to watch your children grow into certain roles is great and very rewarding to watch, especially when other people will say, hey, this person really did a great job, they mean that.
Hey, everybody, welcome back again to another episode of A Titan's Tale. Today, I have a real estate investor, and we're going to have a discussion about the difference between owning a business and being an investor. And his name is Frank Rizzo. Frank is from Staten Island, New York, but he has real estate across the not across, I guess, in the southern United States in the Sunbelt. Frank, welcome to our show.
Chris, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be on your program.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier. Tell me, you said you started working early at 13. Give us a little history about yourself before we go into a few questions.
Sure. So like I mentioned to you, Chris, I've been feel like I've been working my entire life, and not just, because I wanted to. I mean, I always had that drive and desire to want to see what I could do and kind of push myself. So I did start working at 13. I had my first business when I was 17, my senior year of high school, my first quote unquote business. And it led me over time. And I've always been entrepreneurial, right? So, it led me to walk into a real estate career and get my real estate license while I was 19 years old. Didn't stick at 19. I will tell you, when you're 19, you go and you have a lot of different things that you want to do. But when I did come back into real estate in my early 20s, I've been there ever since. And I built a real estate business, traditionally with a brokerage company with a focus on real estate investments or serving real estate investors looking for alternative investments. And eventually it's led me to the mobile home park space, where for the past 11 years, I've been owning and operating manufactured housing communities throughout the Sunbelt. And my partner and I have been involved, and fortunately been involved in 24 different communities throughout Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina. And we continue to own and operate 14 communities right now. And we've launched ways to teach and give others an opportunity to learn about the space and participate in the space as well.
So at age 17, 19, and early 20s, I guess, what do you remember when or why you decided to be an entrepreneur versus going to school or university or trades or university or even military?
And it goes back to internally looking at how I, always went about whatever I did and just taking ownership of it. So whatever I did, I always wanted to be the best I possibly could at it. So my senior year of high school, my uncle happened to own a business, right? And I would pass by the local pizzeria, and there was an empty deli that just went out of business. And I would pass that on the way to the train station every day. And I went to my uncle. I said, this would be a great spot for a Dunkin' Donuts. Let's open a Dunkin' Donuts. I'll work it. I won't go, I'll graduate high school. I won't go to college. I'll work the Dunkin' Donuts and we'll do that. And he said, I have a better idea. He was going to be private labeling snack cakes and to compete with Little Debbie, right? Like these royal snack cakes from North Carolina. And he was going to, be private labeling them and building out routes. So he said, if you come in and you open up any store, you'll be grandfathered in and you could build a route and it could be yours. And then you could sell the route and that'll help you pay for college. Not coming from or having the opportunity to not coming. My father was a, mechanic, structural mechanic. So obviously the opportunity to do this and to have my own business was very helpful, to think that I was going to pay for college this way. So I got into the distribution business. I took my savings, I bought a truck, I painted the truck, pulled out all the seats, and I had this 1980 Chevy van that used to be a school bus, and I turned it into a kind of delivery truck, and 6 o'clock in the morning, I would go to the depot. I would fill up whatever snack cakes I needed to do, these little 99 cents cookies and the quarter, marshmallow. I'd fill up my van. I'd go to school. I had 3 classes, and then I would go to supermarkets and sell, these snack cakes and try to get some shelf space to become a distributor. And that was my first experience into owning and operating a business myself. A little distribution company that lasted probably about 8 months. I don't think I made it a year that first time, Chris.
That's all
But
right.
it was and then at least I had the truck, which I could sell and got a little bit of money back.
What'd you learn from that?
The number one lesson I took out of that is that when you go into business, you have to have a reserve, right? I'm 17. I took my money, I bought a truck, and interestingly enough, nobody eats marshmallow cookies when it's 100 degrees out in the summertime, right? So in the winter and spring, while these cookies sold, it sounds great. And then the summer, when it's 100 degrees and humid, nobody wants to eat a chocolate chip cookie with marshmallows in between it. So obviously a lot of this product stayed on the shelf, and I had to take that product back and recycle it. Well, not having the capital to recycle that product can put you out of business pretty quickly. So one of the lesson I took out of that, especially now when I go to buy or invest in a real estate, I look at that individual piece of real estate as a business, and I make sure I reserve enough capital in my business plan from day one that if I'm going to do a transformation or a turnaround, that I have enough reserves to get me past that point. So I'm not dependent just on, or not believing that, hey, the moment I step in, the sun is going to be shining and the birds are going to be chirping and I'm going to be making money day one. So I can get past that, 12 or 18-month mark and be comfortable with it. And I think that is a lesson learned and something I would give to any entrepreneur, that you're not going to make money day one. Plan for 2 years of making no money to make sure that you can get it to where you need it to be.
Sure. What do you think the difference is between being self-employed versus business owner, and even versus an investor?
That's an interesting question with different dynamics. So you could be, and I could, use the experience from the real estate agents I've worked with and coached, because when you become a licensed real estate agent, you're self-employed.
Yep.
Right. But if you don't run it like a business, you'll never become an investor, right? Because if you run it as, well, I can just I'm self-employed, so I have this freedom, and you're not disciplined, well, you're going to be slave to that self-employment for a very, very long time. And the moment that you take that self-employment and run it with discipline, and what do I mean by that? Understand what it takes to be successful, where you're going to follow a structure in your day or a format of your day. You're going to follow a structure in the people you're going to contact and how your process and your flow. Then you can have a business. And to me, a business is when you can step out of it and it still generates income for you. When you don't have to be there on a day-to-day basis, pulling all the levers, and you've created the systems and processes in place that can create continual cash flow, even though you're not working in the business, working in that job all the time.
So how have you transitioned from working in your business versus on your business over time?
It's, it's a constant evolution, Chris, and you really have to be self-aware and understand what you don't know, and constantly learning how to get better at it. And one of the things, and I had somebody say this to me, and it stuck with me so well, right? And I remember this. It's like, when you're an entrepreneur, you're pushing 10 boulders up a hill at the same time, right? You're constantly, and you have to do it all, because you don't have the right people in the right places. But just like a rocket ship, right? You get to a certain level and you have to let go of certain things to continue forward. Like, so when a rocket ship goes up, it has to let go of its payload. So a smaller portion goes up higher, and then it has to let go of more. So that the smallest bit of it goes it hits the highest length. And as an entrepreneur, you have to look at the processes that you have, what you're really good at, what is your unique ability, what is the thing that nobody else can do that gives you the energy that makes you you, and where can you get the right people to fill the right roles and give them the freedom to do that so you can continue to grow. And it's a challenge, especially because most entrepreneurs, and I don't consider myself unique in this regard, but most entrepreneurs are probably control freaks and believe that they could do things better than anybody else. And I know you run a successful business, and no,
While I believe that's true, nobody's going to do it like I want it done. You got to let go and realize that it's getting done and it's not getting done by you. So you're freeing up your time.
that's exactly right. And it's that mental thing of, okay, it's not going to be the way I would do it,
Exactly.
but it's going to be good enough, and it might be better.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
And I tell my people that I coach, it's like, okay, or even the people that I manage, I want you to make a decision. I want you to do something because I don't have time to do it all. And if I really have a problem, when you sit down as a business owner and you look at it and say, it's done, and it's done, then that's okay. But if you really have a strong feeling about how it should have been done, or talk to your people about it, say, hey, this is how I'd like to see you do it next time, or ask them why they did it. They might have a very good reason that they did it that way.
And again, like, you constantly learn and evolve. Like, so I think about how long I've been in business, and a lot of times the challenge becomes in the clarity of the communication between you and your people.
Mhm.
And one of the things I've found to be very helpful is when I want to do something, right, or even hand it off to somebody, hey, what does success look like for whatever the role is or what we're doing? Like, what does success look like? And if I can clearly identify what I think success looks like, right? Whether
Mhm.
we're buying we're buying a piece of property, and this is what a successful renovation of this is going to look like. It's going to have this. This is what this is going. And if I can clearly define it, then if I've got the right people in place, they can get it there, and however they want to get there, right?
Right.
As long as they could do it and do it in the timeline, that's fine. I don't have to dot every I and cross every T myself.
And
But
within the budget. But
yes.
yeah, I got you.
But if I can clearly define it,
Mhm.
then they can figure it out themselves, or maybe they could say, hey, look, that looks great, but this might be better. And that's how you can get them involved and engaged in your vision. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's one of the biggest challenges that you have is, am I clearly communicating, and are the people receiving what I'm trying to communicate? And that's we're constantly looking at that.
Sure. Real quick, I had a podcast the other day, and he really put it. I mean, I love the rocket analogy. That one's going to stick with me for sure. And he talked about the 3Ds and 3D. I'm thinking like a 3D. And first off, look at what you're doing and delete what's not important. So if it's not going to help you get to your goal, then delete it. I mean,
Mhm.
you don't need to do that. The second D was delegate. So things that you decide you need to do, but it's not your specialty, whatever, then delegate to somebody else. That's what we're talking about. And the third one was D was double down. So double down on the stuff that you're good at and just focus on that.
I think that's when you sit back and you look at it, that's the the biggest challenge that you have, right? Is to say that I could do all this stuff, but it's not the stuff I'm really good at. And if I focused on the stuff that I'm really good at, that nobody else can do, then we'll inevitably be able to grow more. and we'll be able to do more, and we'll be able to serve more. But you have to be able to look at that. And I think that's great to do it, delegate, or double down. I'm going to remember that as well.
Yeah. Has there been a time that you just saw, let's say, the hell with it and go get a job and not deal with the responsibility, I guess?
I think as an entrepreneur, there's a level of stress and uncomfortability that you have to get comfortable with. And it can lead to all sorts of factors. I mean, being in real estate, and right now we're starting to see some things shake out, and definitely a slowdown in traction in transactions. But I've been through a couple of recessions and been through 2007, 2008, 2009, 2013, and that being in a business that's economically sensitive, that causes stress, and you get people who question, why are you doing this, and why are you here? You could have just gotten this job. And you have to be able to withstand that because you have a vision of where you want to go further. So, having doubts along the way, I think every entrepreneur probably at some point or another has had some doubts, but it's having the faith that you're part of something bigger. Like I was put here to do something more, and that's allowed me to continue on, even though there might be people, even in your inner circle, telling you, why are you doing this? You should, wouldn't it be better if you got a city job or you got benefits and you had, back then it's what people knew and they were comfortable. Now, if I would have made that decision, it would have been the worst thing in my life. So you have to have that faith, and that's that belief in that you're there to do something more, to be able to carry you through. And I don't think if you don't have that, it's going to be very challenging. It's like what Mike Tyson says, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. You've got to be able to withstand that punch in the face, because if you're going to be successful in any business, without a doubt, you're going to get a couple of punches in the face, and you got to be able to bounce back from that.
When did y'all start MHP? Pardon me, MHP. I'm thinking miles per hour, but it's really
Yeah.
MHP.
So
How many years ago?
And listen, for somebody who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and to say that my career trajectory led me into becoming a mobile home park owner and operator, that's probably not the typical New York City real estate story, but it goes back to, Chris, I have a real estate business, and my job was to really service and help people. So I had a family came to me, and they needed help. Entrepreneur, the father was an entrepreneur who, while he was first generation, came here, ran some businesses, and did something that most entrepreneurs would do without a 401k. They bought investment property to create some cash flow for when he wanted to retire. Now, when 2008 comes, 2009 comes, there's some financial stress on on what's going on. People aren't paying rents, buildings aren't performing the way they should. And I stepped in to help kind of clear this situation out. So, and in working with this family, they also were retiring, and nobody retires and moves up north, right? They moved down south. And so they had asked if I would stay on and find them something to supplement their income. They had to do a 1031 exchange. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, selling one property, exchanging it for another, deferring the taxes, and they needed the income to keep going, for their retirement. And that led me, by happenstance, to the mobile home park space, because as I was looking for a suitable investment, I kept seeing these mobile home parks as these high yielding assets with very predictable, stable returns, not recession proof, but recession resistant. And as I made my recommendation to them and said, this is what I think you should do, we found a park in South Georgia that they should purchase. The father said, I'll only do this if you stay in the deal with me. So I had to essentially put my money where my mouth was and run this park from a distance, not knowing really anything about the industry. And so that was 11 years ago. It was the best decision that I made to do that. It became very fortuitous because we started to see in the last few years with everything that's happened in New York, a lot of capital leaving, New York City, especially retail capital leaving. And I had already had a footprint or comfortability working or owning assets remotely out of state. And so that kind of led me into the MHP space. And quite frankly, Chris, it was like I said, the best decision I made in my real estate career.
How does your business today look different than 11 years from now or earlier?
Well, right now we're, more, I eventually ended up getting my partner involved in
Hmm.
this and it's kind of grown and scaled this. And we've been through 24 communities, 10 of which we've gone full life cycle, meaning we've taken it from acquisition to, renovation and disposition. Our business is kind of segmented where now we have, an operations team that handles the operation portion of it. We have an acquisition team that handles that portion of it. We have a development team that handles the renovations and developments from that. We have our retailers license, meaning that we bring in new homes to our community from the factory, and we can offer, financing through third-party lenders for our residents. And so we've been able to upgrade that because now we are completely vertically integrated with people who on the ground that are employed by our management company. So when we find a community, we can, we know the people that we have, the human capital we have in place that can move and that can help us get that job done. So that's a huge difference from where before I was completely reliant on who might be there in town, who I might be able to get involved. Now we're able to scale out and take on some more opportunistic situations.
Do you have a story that you can tell that you've helped somebody? Well, you just helped those people, obviously.
Well, I mean, we've helped those people. I think, the things that matter to us, we've got a number of the people that work for us
Hmm.
that started as residents in that community, or maybe former people who may have worked there but didn't really reach their full potential. And in working with us, you could see a noticeable change in their quality of living, right? And so we've gotten people that, and one woman that works for us and now is one of our longest tenured employees. She came in as a resident. She was working part-time in a hotel, right?
Hmm.
Cleaning and some odd jobs. She became one of our most productive managers. While we exited that community, she moved with us. She now manages a few communities with us. Her salary has increased accordingly based off of that. So our standard of living has changed, and she's been able to bring her family along with her. So I mean, the impact that we've had on that person, I'd like to believe has been pretty substantial, and that's part of what makes this industry so great to me is that you really are impacting the people there down on the ground. And one of the greatest stories, and this is from my perspective in terms of
Hmm.
what we do. We had purchased the community from the bank, so it was an 89 lot community, and at the time there was like 30 residents, so 30 homes were occupied, a lot of vacancy. There was a drug dealer, Chris, with a tattoo on half of his face, and he would sit in front of the park and he would sell drugs. He had 5 homes in there that were like trap houses that he would sell them to. So when we got there, it was really rough. So I'm just giving you an idea how
Right.
rough it was.
Sure.
All the good people inside, all the bad people outside. We had to evict people. We renovated the homes, did the roads, cleaned up, got rid of the junk homes, brought in some new homes, redid the park, the amenity center, the playground. And a year later, and actually 14 months later, so we bought it in June, it was in August of the year afterwards, I show up on the ground. And obviously that drug dealer is no longer there and those people aren't there. But there's an ice cream truck running down the street and there's a gaggle of kids chasing the ice cream truck. Now, a year ago, that wouldn't have happened.
Mm-mm.
Some of those people were original residents of that community, right? So when you talk about like impact, there's an impact because that person had their kids stay in the house because the community was so bad. And here now they're living in a place that's clean and safe and secure, and their kids can come out running around. And that's makes me happy to do what I'm doing, and allows me to bring my family involved to show them I want to do things that I want the people I care about, right? I want them to be proud of what we're doing. And that's the kind of impact that I think that I like to believe that we've had.
Well, that's awesome. I got a few questions for you. Let's talk about, you brought up employees, and I have actually have a couple daughters close to your age, your children's age, your daughter's age, put it that way. How's it like working with your family?
Every entrepreneur's dream, I would like to believe that you don't want to uh, force anything
Hmm.
on any of your kids, but I think every entrepreneur probably dreams that, hey, I'm doing this to have the freedom to be able to have the people I want to have around me have there. And then to watch your children grow into certain roles is great and very rewarding to watch, especially when other people will say, hey, this person really did a great job, and they mean that.
Right.
The challenge is making sure that there is accountability, right? Like, hey, there's a role. I'm here. I'm your father, and I love you. But there's also accountability on the other side, and that's always a challenge. So you
Hmm.
you want to make sure that you keep that line. But I think you you do this because you want to at least instill some of those core values into your children. So for me, I look forward to it, and I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to have a couple of my children work for me.
I have my son-in-law work for me, and I also have my daughter help me on the some doing some books and so forth. And I almost, I almost died a couple years ago and had all that stuff up here in my head. And when I recovered, it was very clear that we were getting some stuff out of my head and doing the SOP stuff, and that's been a blessing. And then having my kids on the, you know, aware of what's going on and so forth. It's been very nice.
And so what do you find for yourself, like having there and the son-in-law there, like as a challenge, or that you've had a challenge with that? Um, and how have you dealt with?
Well, not that it's been a challenge. Well, I guess anything a challenge, but it hasn't been that bad with my son-in-law. He's a very hard worker, willing to learn. He makes decisions, and sometimes I tell him how I want him done differently. It's more my daughter. Now, uh, it's not that. It's like, okay, don't forget, he's still my employee, and I need to talk
Mhm.
to him about work. Sorry, I don't know what to do. Now, I have myself maybe, and I've changed myself too. That I got to realize that while I'm a driven entrepreneur all the time, and I work all the time. I mean, my brain hardly ever shuts off type thing. You know what I mean? I
I
got to
know.
realize, yeah. Well, I got to realize that not everybody runs like we do as an entrepreneur. So we had one discussion on a Sunday, and I, unless it's a dire emergency, I got to talk to him about something that's coming up Monday. I'll talk to him on Sunday, but on Sundays I just leave it alone. I try not to bring up work,
Mhm.
and I try not to do it on Saturdays. And that he's in the construction business. So I explained to him that sometimes the people that we're dealing with are at work during the time that we would want to work. But there has to be some parameters too. And so you set parameters, you understand that, and and if there's something wrong, be willing to make the change.
The biggest thing, especially with daughters, it's you got to create accountability, and we as parents, you love your kids and you want to do that, and then but you're right, not everybody works the way you do or the way I do, and the way entrepreneurs do it, because every entrepreneur who I know who's successful, it's not a job that they shut off at 5 o'clock. Like, I
It's their
leave
life.
your life and you think
Yeah.
about it all the time, and then you're constantly thinking, like, how can I improve this, what could I have done there to have been better? And where's the opportunity in something that you see, or how you can implement that? And not everybody, to your point, has that same drive. And that's where you have to kind of dial it back a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Because
I'm not even trying to complain, or I'm just trying to bounce ideas off people. It's like somebody to
yeah,
talk to. So
yeah.
anyway, and it's good to turn off too. I mean, you guys got sometimes you just got to shut yourself down and focus on something else other than that, and you become better over the long term as a business owner.
I've come to that realization as well. I think there's a time where you have to say, and it's funny, I've tried to take specific, quote unquote free days.
Hmm.
And my wife, she had come from the real estate industry, my wife now.
Hmm.
And even on days that I thought were free, I was still doing work, right? I was still like planning and this. So I would take, and the first time I did this, my wife looked at me and she goes, "You really look miserable." Right? Like, no, I'm on my free day. She's like, "You look miserable." Like, I had to get used to not thinking about, like, specifically, I'm not going to answer an email. I'm not going to answer a text.
Yeah,
And it took a little process. But you know what? The people that you love appreciate when you could be very present in their life. And, sending out an email on a Sunday afternoon isn't being present to them. So you have to make some adjustments along the way.
I have some virtual assistants and love them to death, and but it's different than having an assistant here with you. And somebody said, "What do you think what your goal is?" I said, "Someday my goal is be not to answer the phone. I have made it when I'm not answering the phone, meaning that
Mhm.
they're taking all my calls, and then they'll decide if I need to take that call or not." And that to me just excites me someday that that's going to happen. So one of the things I want to shift gears a little bit with the not just mobile home part, but not necessarily that, because you're dealing with communities. Do you do anything with the government? Do you have any subsidy? Do you have any of those programs, or are you doing it all by yourself?
So we like when the residents own their homes,
Hmm.
right? Especially because we're remote, right? So, Chris, if you lived in my community and you wanted to change the carpet, or you had a small leak, or the light bulb, I don't want to have to go in there and be Johnny Fix It every
I hear
single
you.
time. If I was there and I was living there, maybe something different. However, what I've found
Hmm.
was that if the resident owns the home, right, and now they've got the variable, you know, interest in things that might happen. However, they take more pride. I'm giving them an opportunity to own a home. And if we've done our job in that community and created value in that community, that home will actually appreciate in value, and they'll get value back, right?
Hmm.
And we can focus on what we do really well, which is making sure the infrastructure is upgraded, making sure that we have the right amenities, making sure the place is safe, clean, and secure, right, to them. And I don't have to manage the interior of the home or worry about having so much turnover, right? So we focus, if we can offer those homes at a terrific value for our residents, that's what we want to do. I want you to pay your lot rent or community fee, however you want to call it.
Hmm.
And we want to land lease it to you. And we want to run the best value land lease communities in the communities that we operate. But we shy away from taking rentals for that reason. So we want
Sure.
people who own, and when they own, less transitory nature of the business, longer term residents, they take a more watchful eye as to what's going on inside the community. So less of the stuff that you don't want in and more of the stuff that you do want in. So
You're
we
also helping those that can't get loans. Or I have real estate too, not as big as your operation, but I converted all my rental homes into lease to own
Mhm.
and or rent to own or whatever you'll call them, different strategies, and that's been a very good business model for me, at least on my single family homes, because
Sure.
people they do have the opportunity to buy them, and I've sold some of them. It's like, okay, I've helped you, and you got your credit straightened out, whatever it was, you've got a loan, I get my money, everybody's happy, and I go
And
take that money, go do it again.
100%. And you can offer that value to somebody else. And
Yeah.
Chris, it's so important because we're building a society right now that's kind of like sign and drive, where you have a generation of people coming that think, oh, I can never own, I'd rather rent. I'd rather just sign for this and go. And that does not create stability or long-term equity for the next generation. So we want that next generation to own. And if you can create options where, hey, you could come here, you're going to pay your rent, you can clean up your credit in 12 months, you could buy the home from, you're going to, obviously you're going to get an economic benefit, but they're going to get an economic benefit because there's a
Hmm.
light at the end of the tunnel and they can start putting in roots. And we somehow, society wise, have gotten away from that. And you don't want to have a whole generation of people who just think the only way is to rent. I rent my home, I rent my furniture, I could trade in my car every 2 years. And that's not how this society was built. That's not how it can't be good to last that way. So we've got to turn that back. So lease to own, I think, is a great option for people to find the pathway to home ownership.
One last thing we'll talk about is being an investor versus a business owner. Is there a
So
difference? Or, well, I believe there's a difference. I just want your opinion.
yeah, there's definitely a difference. I think the investor is probably a more passive role where you're finding the right operator to run the business, and you want to see that return that you can get off of that investment. And I think if you're from the investor perspective, I think you have to choose your operator wisely, right? To make
Mhm.
sure they know the business, they have a business plan that's been proven, or if and at least effective, and that you're dealing with somebody with integrity because they're going to be running that investment for you, managing that. And then you have to look at, what's important. And the first rule of investing is, don't lose your investment, right? So you got to make sure that they have the right. Everyone wants to talk about how great things are, but let's talk about how I'm going to get my capital back. Number one, right? And I've looked at, I'm an active investor. So I classify myself as an active investor. I run the business. I like developing the business plan. I'm still in that mode of this is what I do. But for the investors I deal with, the number one thing, and I guess this is through being an entrepreneur and having had all these experiences, how do I mitigate the risk while still delivering returns, right? Because I've heard a lot of people come to me with, hey, this is the greatest thing since, sliced Wonder Bread, but your projections are all pie in the sky, and if everything works out well, this is what happened. But what happens if it doesn't? What happens if the market collapses, like we just, and all of a sudden Japan raises rates, these things that are out of our control? How does that business plan look now? And is my investment safe? So we take that approach whenever we look at an investment for us. And when we talk to our investors, like, this is how we go about mitigating our risk. And here's why we think, we can produce or continually to produce the way we have in the past, how we can continue to execute the business plan. And if the business plan executes, who cares where it might be day to day? Because over time, we're going to be all right. Right. And then I'm not going to worry about, day to day. I'm going to worry about, the next 5 to 10 years.
Frank, as we wrap up here, I see that you credit your success to Philo, which is first in, last out. Can you explain that a little bit?
You know, and I give this to any young entrepreneur listening. And one of my first sales jobs that I got, and I started very young, and I had somebody who was older than me that came in and says, if you want to be successful here, right, I guarantee you in 12 months, you'll have a brand new car. If you forget your friends, if you forget, girlfriend, and you focus, but you gotta remember Philo. I said, what's Philo? It goes, be the first one in, be the last one out. If you do that every day for the next 12 months, you will achieve these goals. And I did it. I was the first one in, last one out. 12 months later, I showed up in a brand new car, right?
Mhm.
Found my friends in the same spot. They were at my one of our friends' house doing the same thing that like I never left, but I had the brand new, BMW, and not but at that point that was important, right? And the Philo system is just if you want to go out there and be successful, I mean, Chris, it's 80% of it is showing up, right?
Hmm.
Showing up there purposefully. Don't just show up in order, but if you show up there purposefully, all that other stuff, the market knowledge, the skill, the technique, that you'll get, right? But show up, and no one should be able to outwork you. That's the one thing I control. I know I can put in my effort. No one will outwork me. There's people smarter, better technique, may have come from a different background and and that's okay. Better networks, that's okay. But they don't have, I control what I put out, and they will not outwork me.
Well said. Well, Frank, thank you for your time today. If anybody'd like to get a hold of Frank, they can always go to titanstail.com and go to our directory of guests, and Frank will have his own page there. And Frank, I'm going to give you the last word anyway. People can get a hold of you other than through my website.
Sure. If you're interested in learning more about the mobile home park space, we'll see if that's something that you're interested in finding out more of. You could check us out at the mhpexchange.com, where we also have the industry's first chat MHP, where you can ask it any question you want. It's specific AI just for the MHP space. Or you can watch our show, Trailer Park Turnaround, on YouTube, where we walk you through the process of how we turn these trailer parks around. And that's Trailer Park Turnaround on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for being a Titan.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate being here.